Hey, you guys, happy Friday afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. If you wouldn't mind, if you're logging in, just go ahead and say hi in the live chat. We're going to use that feature and so that we can come up with different topics and hopefully answer some of your questions. And what this yoga life, it's a philosophy that we can apply within our lives, and whether we're on our mat doing yoga or in our lives and living and doing other things like our careers or our hobbies, and we can see how the two merge together. So we essentially develop more of a singular, centered existence, and rather than sometimes, if you've ever felt this way, you go to a yoga studio or your workout or whatever it might be, whatever your meditation is, and sometimes it feels like you're one version of yourself when you're in that lane, when you're in that practice, and then you go back to your life, you get in your car, you go back to your responsibilities or other things that you have to do, and it feels like you're an alternate version in that other space. So the Yoga Life philosophy can really support and develop this concept and to merge them together, so it's a singular lane, and that ultimately is, I guess in theory, a way that we can feel calmer or more focused, engage with ourselves, more acceptance and within ourselves. So many different ways to describe what that blending action can do, but it's really left to you to explore, to see how it feels, and to see, and through your own eyes, the interpretation of what it means, and that's the basis of what we're doing here weekly. So again, thank you for joining. I have some topics that I can certainly bring up and we can chat about, but I would love to hear from each of you and any questions that you may have. And a lot of times, and we'll field questions around yoga poses. Obviously, I'm a yoga instructor. We have a yoga studio here in Los Angeles. So the first thing is, people want to talk about poses and what they're feeling in poses. There's different layers to yoga poses. So on the surface, it may just seem like it's a physical activity. But in the Yoga Life philosophy, we apply 4 different layers that pretty much exist in every single moment of our lives. And we're blending those, or we're traveling on those waves, whether we're in a yoga pose or whether we're driving our car. And those 4 layers are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So we can take a question from any of those genres, if you will, and you might ask a physical question about Warrior 2. Well, and depending on what is going on, there's obviously technical components around aligning your body and then the functional element of breathing while you're in the pose. But what about all the other stuff that's going on? What about the, frustration, or sometimes if you're in a heated practice, like we enjoy a heated practice typically at our yoga studio, and what if the heat is just overwhelming you and you find yourself feeling emotions, things that can become frustrating, or all of a sudden your mental state is now activated and engaging something of the past or some drama or trauma that you may have experienced in your life. And you can see how by acknowledging where we're at and cross these 4 layers yet in the moment, and we can eventually kind of break some of this stuff down, open up some possibility, and perhaps see things a different way and even feel things a different way. So our bodies will adapt to them. Hi, Terry. So I'd love to hear if you guys have any questions, or a good kind of grounding way without thinking of a question is to consider the last practice that you had on your mat. What felt good? What didn't feel good? Were there moments where you got hung up in your breath? Were there moments where you couldn't breathe? Were there moments where you noticed that your mind was perpetuating, a spin cycle of thoughts that just seemed to kind of move further and further out of control? Or did you find that you had a beautiful practice and something about it was very grounding, and you can actually experience the centeredness of your breath or the peace of your mind? So this is just a way to get the conversation rolling. Think about the last practice that you had, and see if anything comes to mind that you would like to share or that you would like to propose as a topic or a question for our conversation. Hey, with this being said, we're also streaming live here, but it's going to be recorded. So I'm going to continue to have a conversation and share a little bit more about some of the kind of higher level chunks of the yoga life philosophy. Sometimes your questions will take us down into the weeds and it'll get very detailed, which I think is incredible because a detailed question that you have certainly is going to be relevant to so many other students. We think that what we're experiencing and what we're going through in our lives and on our yoga mat is so specific, which it is because it comes with things that have happened with you and to you in your life. But when you just tag on relatability into any feature, to any conversation, to anything that we say as teachers and guiding you as students, and you'll find that one person feels it, then 10 people also feel it in their practice or have felt it at some point in their life, just in that one room. So something at a little bit of a higher level is we're driven and many times motivated to become more present in our lives. And we think that this is actually a practice, and if I engage this physical practice of yoga or even a practice of meditation, that I will become more present in my life. If you take a moment and you think about that, it doesn't even make sense. Become more present in my life. Right? You're basically talking about the relationship that sits inside of you with your own mind. It's your own mind. It's inside of you. So becoming present is really not a choice or an option. You are present. Being here right now, you are present. So why, for example, wouldn't your mind understand that you are present? Well, there's so many different reasons why your consciousness and what you're actually viewing in the moment of your life has you feeling a different way than present. So if you're constantly wrapped up in stress, for example, if you just can't break out of the stress of doing something and then doing something else and then going on and doing something else, well, stress is basically like wearing a mask over your face. And it's covering your eyes and it's shielding. And say it's a tinted shade that's over your eyes. So I can look at this tree in front of me, and when my mind is clear, I can see that it's green. But if I'm wearing that shade and shields of stress, then my mind may actually interpret something else. Maybe I look at that tree and I say, no, it's brown. So there's many different components, and just general stress is one of the biggest that prevents us in our own minds and from seeing that we're actually present. So you have to essentially believe it within yourself. It's not about anything that anybody else can say to you, right? I can't recommend a practice and say you're going to become more practice or more present in your practice. This is something that will literally be birthed inside of you as you start to take some of those masks off. So a physical practice or a moving meditation, in this case we love the practice of yoga, and can help and take some of those layers off. And so that within your own mind, and you can realize that you're present, and that presence is the only option. So I hope that makes a bit of sense. And you may even sit and then understand through a moment of reflection and phases in your life when, take the more stressful phase of your life. Now that you're not in it anymore, look back at that version, look back at that mind, look back at that perspective and what you were doing and what you were engaging and how you were feeling, what you were turning to, what you were turning away. Even sometimes when we're sitting in those massive amounts of stress, there's a bunch of good shit happening around us. There's layers and layers and layers of support and within community and within friends. But because we're wearing that mask and that stress is just perpetuating, and driving itself deeper and deeper and deeper inside of our bodies, we're not able to see that that support exists. So this kind of takes us into another umbrella feature that we have the capability of engaging within our practice, and that is reflection. So all of that I've said so far, right, talking about presence and realizing that it's the only option, but we just may not be able to see that we're present because what our mind is wrapped up in, right? Because our mind is simply engaging with what is going on, what is happening around us. It's got a tall task and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing for us. So when you get out of those segments or those phases in your life that you look back on and you're like, wow, those are really stressful, now's the opportunity to engage this practice of reflection. So a little bit about reflection. Reflection isn't sitting here today, right, or being on your mat this morning or this evening, and then going back in the past, attaching yourself into these experiences that you've had, and then actually living in them. Okay, so going back in the past, attaching to the story, living in them, that is not reflection. A reflection, as far as this context is concerned, is that we don't need to deny. Right? There's some really, warped out things that go on in people's lives. Many of them we would like to deny and say, wow, that never happened, and just kind of shield our mind from it. But if we do that, ultimately we're downgrading our consciousness. And whereas everything and that we're fulfilling ourselves with when we're breathing and when we're moving through a practice is with the intent of doing the exact opposite. We want to elevate and upgrade our consciousness so that we can see more, so that we can feel more. So when I talk about reflection, right, and reflecting on these experiences, we have to put a little side note on reflecting with the positive perspective in mind. So things that may have been less fortunate, things that we may have gone through, if we reflect on them, and really we're looking at this scenario and we're trying to pull out, okay, what was the positivity? What is something that I can take as a gift? And this can be something where I say, wow, that's something about me, or that's something about this situation that I never want to repeat again. It's an affirmation that I never want to go down that road again. But if I can look at it, right, with humility, with less judgment, then it can become my teacher. And then I can start to break down in the reflection, what were the components, parts, and pieces that may have contributed into this certain version or to this certain scenario or to this experience that I had in my life. So if you just start tracing your way through, right, first you got to open up that bigger portal in practice and to say that you're willing to reflect, because I think the way that we can embrace this is what I said earlier, in that it's not going back and to relive those experiences. It's not going back and to live in the drama of the story and to live in the past, right? Your presence is your only option, but sometimes when you go back and reflect, and you're going to find the opportunity and to not only forgive yourself in certain situations, but possibly to forgive others. Right? And what is this beautiful teacher called forgiveness doing? It's elevating our consciousness. It's upgrading our consciousness. If we just continue and to live with that story, like put on a backpack, put all the stories in the back of it, and then walk around with it. And this is very common denominator for a lot of people. Walk around with all your stories, right? Some of them make me jaded and, I'm never going to do that. I'm too scared to do this. I learned my lesson on that. I know all of these things, right? But if you just wear the weight of that backpack walking around, it's perpetually downgrading your consciousness and your ability to see. You're basically putting up walls in your mind, and that tree may not look green, right? Even though, and to somebody else, it is very green. and so vividly green, you may still see it as brown. So this is inner work. This is stuff and that we can apply obviously within ourselves. And that's how we should apply this. And because once we start opening up our minds and seeing things more clearly, other people around you are going to begin to notice that. And they're going to take notice, and you will actually become a element of light that is inspiring to others. You're not telling other people what to do. You're just living your life in a more awakened state based on, in this case, the simple practice of presence is the only option, right? If I'm not present, then what's clouding my mind? And to figure out what's clouding my mind, perhaps I need to go down the path of reflecting. And then once I'm reflecting, then I can go down the path of forgiving. And then as I'm forgiving, now I can extract the positive perspective, understand what the teaching is, and so that I can learn from everything and then bring that space that I've just created, because now I've knocked down walls. Now bring that space with me, comes with me in my perspective, comes with me in my pause, my stillness, the opportunity to listen to others, the opportunity to share more vulnerability about my own journey or my own path. And again, putting it out there not as this is the way, but putting it out there as, hey, this is an experience, and perhaps somebody else may or may not relate to it. So even the things like when we're in classes together, and I'm kind of layering the classes with these stories sometimes, right? I'm sharing things that have been part of my journey. I'm not saying, hey, this is what happened to me, right? I'm putting out there those nuggets of positive perspective, those teachings that have come through this process that I'm explaining. And I'm saying, here, take it. You may relate to it, you may not relate to it, but guess what? Even if you have a harsh reaction, no relatability at all, I have no idea what he's talking about, that's not me, that's not my life, guess what? We're still learning. And through that process of engagement, being on our mat and connecting to our breath. So whether you agree or you disagree, it's not important. So this is a really kind of great topic for, our worldly perspective. And so many human beings, nearly 8 billion, and so many opinions that you may come across on a regular basis, and so many different interpretations of truth. Like, what is truth? When somebody says, this is truth, or this is fact, what does that really mean? The concept is, what manifests as truth inside of yourself, this becomes truth without question. You're not seeking the validation. You're not trying to prove anything and then therefore receive something back in return where somebody says, oh yes, I agree with your truth. Your truth is just your truth. And so a truth process, right, can ultimately start to develop without even trying to develop it. A truth offering, a truth process, a true existence in your authentic self is not something that you're going to walk around and tote around to your friends and to your family members and say, hey, check out all my truth. Your truth is going to become basically your moral compass. Your moral compass, and so that as you continue to move through the variable factor of life and you're taking one step in front of the next, and you're in this job today, and then you take a little bit of risk and you go to a different job, or you're in a relationship here, but then you're not feeling fulfilled in that relationship, and so then you go on and you may break from that and go into another. So these aren't truths that you're just going to go around and try to explain and seek validation of. This is something that will sit with you. It'll feel like that concept of space, like when you're stretching your hamstring and then you come out of the hamstring stretch and you can feel in the softening of the muscle, the deepening and the widening of the breath. So again, the truth is really going to develop itself. It's not something that you have to try to do. To go down a little bit more of a personal journey and example, it's great right now, I think, where we are to, I think many people are revisiting certain phases or certain features and spans of time that perhaps we've had in our lives and the way we've seen ourselves in our lives. So pulling up some old photos is a nice way to start to draw some of those memories up. And now remember, we're not attaching ourselves and living in the past of those memories, and because they may be pleasant, they may not be pleasant, But as you start to pull that up, you can really start to take more of an objective viewpoint at who that person was, what the practice was at that time. Did the practice exist mostly from a physical standpoint, right? I remember starting this journey with yoga, and it was just about the physical element of the heat and the sweat, and then learning what it meant to breathe. And then as you continue to go down that road, then you're starting to reveal these other layers and the emotions and the mental state, and the mind starts doing something different when the breath is leading the way. So I went out and pulled up some old photos that I found from, really before I started practicing yoga. And something that I'll share is this adventure that was pretty much brought to me. It's not something that I really sought out, but it was something that was shared with me, and I wasn't necessarily comfortable with it. Now, here's the thing. How do you know that you're willing to do something even when you're not super comfortable about doing whatever it might be or whatever is being presented? And the answer to that is so abstract. I don't think we can really peg the moments in our lives when, we're going to be totally motivated to step outside of our comfort zone and to do something that we're uncomfortable with. So I think it's raising the bar and to look at what the elements are around you and who you might trust, and to help you step into some of these in situations that are a little uncomfortable. I believe that it can be very uncomfortable and to come onto your yoga mat. So if you trust your teacher enough, if you trust a friend that invites you to come practice enough, then you're willing and to put yourself in that position in where then, you may start to grow a little bit. You may have this opportunity down the road and to reflect on that time and see how much you've grown. So this adventure that I went on before really even starting to practice yoga was this art and spirituality retreat that I had mentioned this week in Bali. And it wasn't something that I really saw myself engaging that much. I felt like it was something that would be a nice vacation. Bali's a beautiful place, and so I figured, heck, why not go on a vacation, have some relaxation, take a few weeks off of work, and just having that state exist allowed me to receive so much and to connect in a way where it wasn't, engaging with things outside of myself. And it could be Bali, it could be, the mountains. It doesn't have to be, something that's labeled as a place where we awaken. We can awaken right here in the backyard. We can awaken when we're sitting in our car. I think it can really happen, anywhere, anytime, any place. Well, long story short, this adventure really started to unravel in some of those ways in that my mind was clouding my consciousness. The mind was so perpetuated with other things and distracted by many other things that it can lose the value and understanding of who we really are, or who I really am. And so things like this, connecting with other people, stepping outside of your comfort zone, and this can start, as we would say, to wake us up. Basically, waking us up means just seeing ourselves and for who we are, and realizing, going all the way back, that the present moment is not something that we're practicing to get to. You're already here. So within yourself, within your body, you're already here. And as you start to take down some of those boundaries and barriers and distractions from your mind, you can actually realize. So, that's basically what it means to yoke. That is yoga, that is union, that is the moment of self-realization that can happen once, it can happen 1,000 times, and who knows what that looks like for you. So going on this adventure, right, you don't know it at the time. We never know, okay, what this is going to lead us to next. But living in the yoga life, you can feel that what you're doing now, right, this element of elevating your consciousness and opening up your mind, right, is not necessarily going to give you something in the future, but it's going to prepare you for everything that may happen in the future so that you can see it more clearly and so that you can take a step into it, basically becoming more mindful, more aware of what you're doing, and that's going to alleviate a lot of this backpedaling. So these features that I'm talking about, if you continue to engage in your process, the ability to reflect, and it can be, reflection. You don't want to madden yourself and make it a task to reflect. When it pops up, that's the opportunity. But if you can make that part of your regular routine and part of your practice, it's going to really alleviate a lot of this backpedaling, right? Where I fall back into a previous, because, we need those reminders, we need those previous versions, and to basically keep pumping us up and say, hey, keep living at the highest, most elevated version of yourself. And when you think you've gotten into the highest, most elevated version of yourself, guess what? There's more room to develop, there's more room to grow. Okay? But the key in that is that we're not making this another task. This isn't something else that we want to come and stress ourselves out about when we wake up in the morning. Okay? There's plenty of those variables going on around us. And so this is simply, don't try, right? Let some of this establish itself through this conversation. And when you get to your yoga mat, or say your moving meditation is running, right? Or cycling, or swimming, or whatever it is, okay? Allow this conversation and framework and to just maneuver with you, right? It's just going to be like a massage. It's going to go through different parts of your body. It's going to pop up here. It's going to feel good. Over here, it's not going to feel so good. Just let it kind of become part of the experience whenever you find yourself in your moving meditation. And so in this case, this adventure, and that was an awakening for me. It was something that I hadn't expected. It did take me out of my comfort zone. It had all of these layers to it, and that were ripe and to awaken. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to revert. So I think in short order, the opportunity to reflect is really beneficial, and so that you can continue to prepare yourself and stay open for whatever might be coming next. So coming out of that, just felt so inspired to continue to engage the practice of yoga. And physically, it was making sense. Had done so many things with my body over the years, so many ways, and what you do with your body can be how you identify so many parts of your personality. So growing up and playing sports, football in particular, became a big, kind of label that I carried with me, right? And this is who I am, and this is the way that I think. Well, as yoga started to become more of an interest and my curiosity was blossoming, it was really allowing me the space and to break down a lot of those labels, okay? Not disintegrating the value of what football was or what those lessons were. It actually allowed me to see them so much more clearly. So there's this celebration that is going on, right? No longer like this mourning of a loss, if I can't play anymore, or if I got injured and something stood in my way. It really started to blossom this understanding and this celebration of everything and that it happened in life. And so it continued to merge its way into relationships. And if you ever look around and you're wondering, what is the common denominator when I look at all of these different relationships? And I've got friends and I've got family, and there's this whole web, right? And if you want to know what the common denominator is, right, it's you. It's the person that is sitting, the person that is feeling, the person that is you. You're the common denominator in the web of your life. And so it's not all these other people that are doing something or making you feel a certain way. It's you. All of those other people are simply reflecting a part of you that you may like, that you may not like. And so it's really interesting when you start to open yourself into these little adventures that can wake you up, because you're going to meet people, which means you're going to meet parts of yourself and that you may not have known and to exist. And that can be great, that can be humbling, and sometimes that can be disappointing. I'm not saying to put any weight or levity into what comes of that, but to put yourself out there, to become a little bit more vulnerable, can really just continue and to expand this worldliness of ourselves. Obviously, we have certain skills and certain things that we're more comfortable with and we think that we're good at, but how about stepping into something that you may not identify that you're good at, but that you become part of the process, you become part of the information that is inspiring the mind, that is continuing and to kind of break down and some of these walls and some of these barriers. And so, moving deeper and deeper into the yoga practice, unfortunately, gave me this openness and this drive and this potential where, I don't sit here and say, hey, I thought about teaching yoga for years and years and years. I think it was more so collected within the moments as they were existing, and when the curiosity was starting to rise, I had beautiful teachers around me that could see that, and that's what we're here for. This isn't everybody needs to become a yoga instructor, but I think us as teachers, it's great to observe and then to support and then to ask that curious question, and so that you have the opportunity to realize what it is that is going to elevate you, or to as we're saying, kind of clear your consciousness and continue to elevate into that most authentic version of yourself. So as people start to support you in feeling that, there's a lot of confidence, and that you start kind of wearing, like putting on your clothes, you start wearing confidence, and who doesn't like that? There's a joy, there's a cheer, there's energetic presence and excitement that you step into your days with. So this ultimately led me to my first teacher training, and it was again something that was so beyond the levels of comfort that I could have imagined. It was not only in taking yourself out of the environment that you live in, but actually putting myself into a drastically different environment. Even though on the surface you could say, it looked very beautiful, it was actually so far beyond the city life. It was in the jungle of Brazil, where I did my first teacher training, and with that, I think there comes a lot of things that are uncomfortable. In going back and as we're talking about this now, the phases of reflection are plentiful still, and this is almost 10, 11 years ago. And you can look back into, and because you were there, you have these not only mental memories, but these responses where you can actually feel, you can actually taste, where you were and what you were. It's like it's so vivid that it's a beautiful place and to encounter. And now that you know what you went through and what you experienced, if you go back through the reflection process, you may find so many more things and that you weren't privy to when you were there, or years after you were gone, or years and years and years after you were gone. So something that came up this week, which struck my memory from Brazil, was one of our students posted and shared a photograph of their pet snake on their yoga mat here in Los Angeles. So they're practicing yoga, and they're in crow pose, and the pet snake, boa constrictor, I think, the tail is underneath the person in crow pose, and the head is coming off the mat and facing right up at the camera. The picture is so amazing to me. But when I saw it, it reminded me of, at the time, what was my greatest fear? And for whatever reason, I really still can't break down why this is the case, but I felt like a great fear was a snake, a large snake. I don't know why that came to be. I used to play with snakes when I was little. At a certain point, I don't know if something happened. I can't remember. It's not sitting in my memory into that place where I'm like, I know why I don't like snakes or why I hold on to this fear of snakes. So I see this picture and it takes me back and to reflect on this moment when I was in Brazil doing my first teacher training, and we had one day off a week, and we would get to go and sometimes we would walk. It was about a 45-minute to an hour walk down the beach to get to this amazing little surfer town in Brazil. And sometimes once you get there, then you would get on a boat. It would take you across the channel, and then you can get into the town. So we have one of these days, and it's getting to dusk, and we're starting to make our way back to the camp where we're doing our training. And as the group of us are starting to walk closer to the water, there's quite a bit of commotion that is happening near where all the boats are docked. And as we're getting closer, you start to see this huge snake on the boat dock. And at this point, this was something I was aware of. I remember thinking, you're in the jungle of Brazil, you hear stories about anaconda and the Amazon. So it was definitely something that I was, going through at the time. They were telling stories how they would find, there was a 40-foot anaconda that they found behind the kitchen where we were eating every day. So I remember this being a part of my practice, a part of my fear, a part of my being. And so as we're walking and you're going through this process where you're elevating and you're becoming more conscious and you're becoming more aware and you're becoming more confident to face these things, I don't know what it meant to anybody else, but I know that when I saw that snake, it sent shivers through my entire body. Now, the snake isn't touching me, the snake isn't attacking me. Why am I feeling this? I still don't necessarily know the complete explanation of this symbolism, but sit there and start watching. And I'm like, of course this is happening. This is exactly what's supposed to be happening. And so that's a cool feeling, even when you're not fond or you wouldn't have chosen for something to be happening, but you can see why it's happening, that it's actually part of your awakening and part of your process, and so that you can continue to step out of that. So one of the locals decides that he's going to catch the snake and drown out this commotion and everybody that's screaming and whatnot. So this guy goes in and he goes to grab the back of the neck and he picks it up, and the snake turns around and bites him right on his arm, and he lets go of the snake, and it goes flying up into the air and then comes back down onto the ground, and everybody starts running and screaming again, like, what are we doing? The snake, he's not attacking us, he's actually in his natural element, right? He's not desired to be caught. He's probably just moving his way from, one point into the next, going back into the water, so on and so forth. So as I look back on that experience, it brought up all of those feelings, and it brought up this great reminder that things happen exactly when they're supposed to happen, and that they're here and so that we can continue to wake up, right? So seeing the picture of our friend's snake, right, on the Instagram, taking myself back into that experience, reminding me that everything happens exactly as it's supposed to, and it's meant to wake us up. Now the question is, and what I'm curious about now, and what I'm sure I'll find out at some point in the future, now knowing that Kenya exists, Tanya Kay, and I see you on here, what would I feel being in the presence of Kenya? Could I develop this closure around whatever that experience was, or what made me fearful at some point along the way? Because remember, in childhood, I played with snakes all the time. I remember running around chasing my brother with a snake because he was scared of it. So when did that all flip, right? When did something take place? And then how did that process in Brazil serve me of feeling what I was feeling, now reflecting and admiring the quality and the reminder that everything happens as it's supposed to and when it's supposed to, and to then see this picture pop up. Now, one day, I feel genuinely prepared and to have an encounter, hopefully, with Kenya and see, how that feels. And that will take us to a whole different place within our practice of trust, within our practice of continuing to elevate. Sorry about the helicopter. We'll just let him pass for a second. I'll take a look at your comments here. Tanya, you're on here. I love that. That's so awesome. I didn't know how far I would dive into the Kenya story, but I'm glad you're on here. Yes, Terry, I have the snake picture. I actually sent it to Tanya earlier because she's like, I have to know more about the snake. So if you guys remember in class this week, I actually brought that up in a class. So when we're talking about and sharing in relatability, right, and through our own experiences, that is something that I brought up a little bit more specific because I felt that it was such a valuable gift. But many times when you're teaching, there's just not that amount of space, right, or you don't have that much time and to sit here and tell stories, which is why I love this platform that we're all sharing in now with these yoga life chats, is that we have this space to talk. This is what we would do if we could just hang out and have, a tea or a cup of coffee together. So Kenya is a teacher for sure. Tanya K. She just wrote on the side there. And I was looking at, Tanya, because I wanted to see, what are other people feeling in response to this picture that Tanya, you and Teddy put out there. And because I saw a previous picture earlier on in the quarantine where Kenya was wrapped around Teddy when he was in plank pose. And I looked at the comments I went back and looked at the comments on both of those photos, and you get everything across the board, people that are snake lovers. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. Well, I think we can see beauty even if it's something that we may not necessarily be comfortable with. And then you had other people that were like, oh, heck no. I can't do the snakes. But when you talk to Tanya and Teddy, that's their baby. That is part of their family. That is them coexisting with this beautiful creature, right? There's absolutely no fear wrapped around that at all. So I think it's really cool how something, I think we, kind of get on Instagram and things like that, and, you can think whatever you want to think about it. But there can be this yoga life, element into everything that we share, to everything that we put out there. And again, it's not that Tanya or Teddy were saying, hey, and somebody should feel that they had no idea that this is something that was such a huge part of my yoga life journey. So that's how, I think we're all really right where we're supposed to be. So pretty cool, and I'm just wanted to share that part of the experience. Let's see, Ricky, welcome. Ricky says, hi Joe, on dogmas, and we use them to grow, yoga, martial arts, these are dogmas, yes, for sure. In class you have mentioned the process of breaking dogmas to be free. My question is how to break through dogmas. Okay, so this is what I was talking about before in response to yoga is not the only way. I call it more of this, really what we're doing, we've got this container called yoga, right? And if you want, just to describe, dogmatic approach is basically saying, here, this is a way, follow this, and, align yourself within, you're putting yourself in a bucket, basically. Well, that's really not what we want to do. So whether it's yoga, running, cycling, swimming, like I was talking about, doing whatever, right, drives you to explore your moving meditation. So in taking it out of the actual activity and labeling it as the activity that it is. And seeing in this case with yoga, because it's something that we're all curious about, and we obviously love to a certain degree, and we're curious. But if you remove it and you take all of those filters away, it's about the breath. And it's about the breath even if you're running, and it's about the breath even if you're swimming, and it's about the breath even if you're, playing lacrosse or basketball or whatever it might be. And even if you're sitting and you're not moving at all, right? It's about the breath and observing the air coming into your body and the air going out of your body. And so the breath is really that component that allows us to remove all of these filters, right? And all of the dogmas that we talk about. And hopefully that gives us the opportunity to connect and to relate to more people. Like, there are, I think, ways that dogmas can really interest people, because as humans we tend to want to identify ourselves in the pack. We're pack animals. So if I find something that I like and then I identify myself within that pack, now I start to get this kind of perception that I'm accepted or that I'm enough or whatever those things might be. And unfortunately, it's probably a little bit of a false sense and probably manipulating our minds to a certain degree when we adhere in that way, right? If we really want to talk about, we can enjoy something, we cannot enjoy something. This is the whole premise around accepting an invitation. If a friend says, hey, come with me into this circuit training workout, okay, let's do it. You will find something if you have this practice layered through breathing, less identified as what you're actually doing and putting it into the framework of the moving meditation, because the breath is the component and that is going to really involve you in the freedom of your mind, nothing else. And so you can even break that down within the yoga sector itself, different types of yoga. I do hot yoga. I do non-heated yoga. I do Kundalini yoga. I do Anusara yoga. I do this teacher's yoga. I do that teacher's yoga, right? Alan Watts has this great phrase in one of the... Alan Watts is a beautiful philosopher, and they've layered his speeches and whatnot over kind of new wave trendy music, and so you can put it into a class. But one of the things that he's making a gas about in one of these phrases, he says, my yoga is better than your yoga. Like, think about that. And that's what is going on, right? Because of the culture, because of the society, but that is not doing anything and to support the freedom of the expression of the breath. That's just attaching the mind, right? Manipulating a situation, giving us a false kind of sense of this support. So in order to go down that path and really discovering freedom, it's got to go through you. It can't be attached into any of these things, into the dogmatic approach. I think we learn in step-by-step measure certain things being dogmatic, and to really explore this expression that isn't bound and tied down, because what happens eventually, and something that works is no longer going to work. So what are you going to do? You're just going to throw it away, right? Devalue it at a certain point. Use it to actually and compare this version of yourself and say, well, that doesn't work anymore. Well, at one time, it actually works. So instead of ever running into that position where you got to use something of your past and to compare and despair and to put something down to make this new something seem higher, right? That's your first sign, in that you're probably too deep in the attachment of the dogmatic approach. If you can kind of hold everything at a level place, right, and see the opportunities and dabble here and dabble there. I mean, if anybody's going to get, a tag, my family knows that I love yoga, but I desire and I hope that I can break it down and like I was saying, not make everything, have to be about the actual yoga practice. See, I'm stretching yoga really based on the breath and this idea of awareness and what I'm saying in regards to, elevating our consciousness And so this is going from, again, that very and kind of deep dive, specific, unique and feature that we all get to experience within our lives, and but then drawing it back up. And so it's this bigger and this greater perspective and bucket, where even when I'm talking about yoga, it doesn't mean, right? And this is where definition becomes very interesting. Some people will define yoga as doing the yoga poses. You have to understand what something is meaning to somebody when they're talking about it. For me, yoga is not about the yoga poses. When I say yoga, I'm talking about the breath. So I'm not talking about hot yoga, non-hot yoga, kundalini. I'm just talking about, I love the breath of yoga, and I think that's what and can really relate us and expand us and through this philosophy. So I hope that makes some sense, Ricky. And then you also say, other than time spent learning the dogma, how do we break it? For example, Muhammad Ali broke the dogma of boxing and has completely freed himself when he fights. Exactly. So I think that's a process, as I was just explaining, because in dogma, you will, pretty much alienate yourself, pigeonhole yourself, and even a great performer, a great athlete, it doesn't necessarily become this well-rounded, happy, blissful experience. You find people that, are really good at something, they become isolated, they become lonely, right? They become so driven by whatever that something, whatever that greatness was, which at one time was the most incredible gift, now has become the thing that binds you up the most. And so it's moving through that breath, right? Seeing that it's something that has been a great teacher and something that you've been able to connect to as a teacher, but when it becomes your teacher, now it becomes your space holder. And so exactly like you're saying, the flow, whether it's boxing, the flow, whatever the activity might be in the garden, the flow with your family, the flow in how you move through the environment with your children and your loved ones. And when you go back to see your family for the holidays, that's always a great opportunity to really stretch and expand in this idea of flow and letting everybody, really involve themselves in their part, without holding people into that certain position or into that certain role, because that way we're not supporting each other in growing, or, like I'm saying, elevating our consciousness. So even if somebody doesn't have a practice and you're involved in this practice of expansion and awareness and consciousness, just by being around, right, somebody with that practice that they're engaging, you're going to feel it. You're not going to describe it. Again, you're not going to walk around and say, hey, this is what you should do. It's the opposite of that. You're just going to be living, and other people are going to feel it, And so it really breaks down a lot of what we were saying with the worldly debate, all the opinions, and helps us feel more of this oneness and connection that I believe we really have with each other when you base it all on the breath. Without your breath, we don't have you. Without my breath, we don't have me. I can hear my son in the background here. Without his breath, we don't have him. And so it's quite an emotional and deep connected place when you start to see the world as breath. It's pretty sweet. And thank you for your questions, you guys. Do you guys have anything else that you would like to propose? We have a few minutes left in our hour here, and I'm sure anything that you contribute, again, will be valuable and relatable to somebody else. Hallie. Hi, Hallie. Share with me. Tell me what's up. Yes, releasing emotions during stretching. So, one of the four layers, we have physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Just want to know your thoughts about what happens when we do this. So, I have had many students over the years, and so many people um, would find themselves becoming very emotional during the postures in classes, to the point where these weren't just emotions that you're able to kind of harbor within yourselves, but these emotions were coming into the surface, right? So there's tears coming out of the eyes, right? The whole premise is that, our body is with us in every single moment up to this point. And so everything that we've harbored, when I talk about the fear of snakes, when I talk about the things that limit us, when I talk about attaching ourselves to dogma, when I talk about ways that we feel that we've been done wrong, ways that we feel that we've done right, all of these things, judgments, all of this has got to be filtered through our bodies. And so if we're not releasing it, this is the benefit of having some sort of consistency to your practice. And you'll notice it if you're not, doing something in that realm of moving meditation, your body. And at this point, now that you've been doing it, you probably can't even think about doing it any other way. So you imagine, wow, how can somebody else, not do anything, not have any process, and to move this meditation through their body and to let some of this stuff break apart. So I would say there's probably in some sort of curve that exists for most people, right? When you go from a lack of movement, a lack of mobilization, right, and basically doing something in the realm of moving meditation, and your body has all of this stuff stored up. And it's going to become muddled, right? There's things we remember, there's a lot of things, the majority of things, and we don't vividly remember in our memory. So once you start moving, right, the access to the emotional layer, boom, immediately. That's the beauty of this premise and of this practice. The physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual is happening with the intersection of the moment, the only place that we can be, and to go all the way back. So your mind can be 10,000 yards downstream, 10,000 yards in the path. It doesn't matter. The intersection that you're in the moment, accessing these layers, if there's emotion that is stored up inside of you, the mobilization, the movements, and the postures, and the breath down. So when it comes, please let it come. I've heard from so many people this week sitting in the detox practices weeping, just weeping, and things coming to mind, and they're weeping and they're letting it out. And I think that is so beautiful, and I want nothing more but to support that a process is happening. And I know that it can be scary, but that's why we have each other and to reach out to, right? And to ask this question like Hallie is doing. Now, you can't force it. You can't plan for an emotional release, right? You can certainly shut it down when it starts coming, but I would encourage you away from shutting it down. If you start to feel it happening, and take some deeper breaths and allow those emotions, right? And this is not the time. When you're in the actual release, turn your focus to your breathing and let the emotions come. If your mind identifies with the emotions, great, observe it. But this is not the time to start to try to fix things. The moment you begin to attach, right, your focus into that emotion or whatever it is, or you start to become more intellectual about it, you're going to draw yourself back away from the potential of how deep it can go. So when it starts happening, breathe with it and take a breath with it and feel it. And then continue to take a breath with it and feel it. And back to my scenario about a student, many students saying, hey, I get emotional almost every single class. When is it going to stop? And I say, when it's supposed to. When all of that energy that we're harboring in our body is no longer there, then it's going to stop. You can't stop it, but at the same time, it can't stop you. So I think that's a really cool way, and to kind of wrap up today's conversation, is that if you continue to move with your breath, if you continue to build this relationship of trust in your being with your breath, it's going to take you from everything that we talked today. It's going to take you from your fear. It's going to take you from the things that you've attached to. It's going to take you into places that you may not be comfortable with. It's going to take you in all of that and make a practice out of it. Once it becomes a practice, you're no longer carrying the weight. You're no longer stressing. Your backpack is actually becoming more and more empty. And you're going to feel that moving around with your confidence. You'll feel that interacting with other people. You'll feel the way in that you engage, with different moments in your life in ways that you probably couldn't have imagined yourself, engaging. So it's all part of the journey, right? This, I hope, is just giving us a little bit more context to, again, relate to, not relate to, but establishing the framework. And so the next time we hit our mat, we're feeling more inclined to explore these 4 layers. So with that, you guys, if you don't have any more questions, I look forward to doing this again with you next week. And feel free to share this with anybody. Feel free to listen back to it. Put it on when you're, falling out and going to sleep, and just let it kind of maneuver with you, right? It's not going to ever be a plan and say, here, do this, step A, B, and C. This is just here to support all of us as we continue, our process of waking up and becoming more aware in our lives. I hope you all have a beautiful afternoon into the evening, and I hope you'll join us for our detox practice tonight. Could be cool, especially after being in the deeper conversation today. Until next time, everybody. Namaste. Oh, thank you, Hallie. Welcome to our yard. I was like, I can't wait. I think we should haven't told Stacy yet, but I think we should have a gathering at some point when that becomes an option. It'd be fun to have everybody here, especially since we've been streaming class from here. So thank you.